In this introductory Photoshop session, we're going to restore an old photograph using basic image adjustments. We're going to go over the following basic skills: rotating the original scan, adjusting the levels using the Auto Levels command. We'll increase the saturation of the colors in the image. Next, we're going to burn the background or restore some of the color intensity that was lost as the image aged over time. And finally, we're going to crop the image. So if I look at my original scanned image, you can see that it's been skewed to the right. This is easily adjusted using the Transform tool, and you're going to transform the entire layer. You can find the Transform tool under Edit, Transform, Rotate, or I can hit Command T or Control T on my keyboard and bring up the Transform tool. The bounding box lets me know that I am in the Transform tool mode. Notice how I move the cursor over the image that the cursor changes. It changes from Move, which is the black arrow, to Rotate as I get near to the corners, or pulling right and left as I get to the right and left edges, or pulling up and down. So the Transform tool is kind of like a scale tool, but it also allows you to move or rotate the image. In this case, I'm going to rotate the image until I get it centered where I'd like. Now, I have already done this previously, and so I'm going to pull up the layer in which I've already rotated the selection and continue. One of the things that happens to images over time is that they fade and the colors start to yellow. So with this faded image, the first thing that I'm going to try is I'm going to allow Photoshop to try to emulate the original integrity of the image using the Auto Levels command. Image Adjustment Levels. Here's where you can find Auto Levels. If you choose the Levels tool and click on Auto, notice how it is restored some of the original integrity of the image. But let's see what happens if I do something, if I try to manipulate the levels on my own. Let me bring up the layer, Image, Adjustment, Levels. Here's Auto Levels. Here's what the computer would do. If I try on my own, Image, Adjustment, and Levels, I can choose the white sample in the image, means I'm going to sample the lightest area of the image. And then I can choose my darks or shadows, and I can try to find kind of the darkest area of the image. And that's another way that you can adjust the levels by hand. So by adjusting levels by hand, you can see what the computer actually calculated on its own, and it did really a pretty good job. So once I've adjusted the levels, I click OK. And you can see here's what the computer did using Auto Levels versus what we have done. Everything has sort of a little bit of a green cast when we adjusted the levels by hand. So let's go with what the computer has done using Auto Levels. And the next thing that I might like to do is increase the saturation. You can see that there's potential for a lot of great color in this image, but it really looks washed out. Under Image Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, I can bump up the saturation in my image overall if I have Master in the drop-down menu selected, as opposed to just bumping up the reds or just bumping up the yellows. I'm going to bump up the colors overall with Master selected and push the saturation. The resulting of this can be found in this layer, where I have bumped up the saturation of the colors. You may or may not be able to see that in this demonstration on your screen, but the red in the hair has come up, the blue in the necklace, a lot of the colors that are important to this image are increased. The other thing that's interesting about this image is that the background detail is sort of washed out. Now you may or may not want to bring back those colors depending on if you think that it's going to interfere with the focal point or the person in the image or whatever the focal point of your image may be. But I can do this using the Burn tool. If I select the Burn tool and from my toolbar left, I can choose maybe a larger brush since I'm dealing with the background overall. And I'm going to put the hardness of the brush somewhere in the middle. I don't want it too hard, not too soft, just right. And I can go through and bring up some of the background, resulting in a darker and overall more saturated, more details, and the colors in general of this image are much more saturated than what we started with. Finally, I might want to crop the image. Notice how there's some discoloration on the edge of the image, and maybe I want to keep this border of the image, or I want to print it on new photo paper, and I don't want to have the older margins that were in the original image. So using my marquee selection tool, I can pull and select the rectangle of the image. And one way to crop the image is under Image and then Crop. Another way to crop the image is using the Crop tool. The Crop tool can be found in your toolbar and it looks like this. Using the Crop tool, it's very similar to using the rectangular marquee. You simply draw the area that you want to keep, and then it kind of allows you a little bit more fine adjustments with the Crop tool than simply using the marquee rectangle selection. And once you get your selection what you think looks pretty good, then you can hit Return and it will crop the image. So again, you can use the Crop tool to crop the image, or you can use the rectangular marquee tool to select an area and go under Image and Crop. It won't let us because we just cropped the image. And this concludes your introductory session number 2 in image restoration.